Hello, everybody, and welcome to ʻAha Wahine Kūhinapapa. This is a webinar series we've been doing for the past 2 years, celebrating intergenerational mana of Wahine. You can find all of our past shows at www.ahawahine.org. We thank you all for joining us today, and especially today, a special day, November 17th, as we are heading into our makahiki season. We need to mahalo all of the people that are helping to make this possible. First of all, we want to say mahalo to Hawaii People's Fund, who really has supported us and provided the funding for this webinar series. We also are supported by Papa Ola Lokahi, o EVTV, e Kolumea Nui, University of Hawaii, Roots Program at KKV, and Maili Kukahi. So we are so excited for our program tonight, where we are going to talk about Wahine sexuality. We have Kumu Hula, Mehanaokalā Hind, and Dr. Aukahi Austin Seabury with us tonight. So aloha to my friends and to our speakers, but they're also my friends for a long time, so happy to have them on here. Aukahi Austin Seabury is the Executive Director of Iola Lahui. She's also a co-founder. She's amazing and does all kinds of work within health and healing and wellness for our families, for our community, just really looking at it through a cultural lens. One thing that we all three have in common is hula, and Aukahi is with an olapa with ʻAʻaliʻi kumakani, ke aliʻi ʻAʻaliʻi kumakani. And then we have Mehanaokalā Hind. I think I've known her almost since she was born, as we are hula sisters from Napua Oliko Lehua, and we both graduated unikit in the Kumu class in 2009. Mehana is the Senior Vice Director of Community Programs at CNHA. She also does midday mana'o with Manu Boyd, who is also Aukahi's Kumu. So we have all of these different connections. And today we just want to have this conversation that's people don't always talk about, or there's some shyness or shame, or we've had influences that say that these aren't the things. And we want you, the audience, to also feel free to send us your questions, to write into the chat, to send us your thoughts. We're going to be monitoring that as we go. And so I am really just going to open the floor up to both of them.
Mahalo nui, Kaiu. This is so festive. I'm so excited. No, Mehana is not doing a metaphor for keeping talks about sexuality in the dark. She'll actually just be right back. I think the mana of this moment and the power of what she brings made her computer freak out. So she'll be right back. But in the meantime, I guess I just wanted to set us up to say, I know this is going to be just a fast hour. Anytime Mehanaokalā and I get together to talk about any topic, really, it starts to fly. But especially this topic, she and I have had many a conversation that center around what we're going to talk about this evening. And so I guess one of the things that we said, what do I want those of you who are listening to know? We are hoping that when you hear what we're talking about, these concepts, these ideas, and how we're putting it all together, we are talking about you. So take this in as it connects to you and your experience and where you are and how it might be helpful for you, rather than thinking, oh, this is just for folks that are at this stage of life or folks that are at this stage of life. When we're talking about the journey where we lilo I Wahine, where we lilo I Haumea, this is about all of you and all of us. And So just kind of centering, knowing we mean you when we're talking about all of this. So there you are. I told them that you were doing a metaphor about keeping it in the dark, and that you were, but then I told them it was the truth, which is that you have so much mana that you, when Fritz one regular modern technology situation. So with that said, hi, my friend, let's boogie. I guess I wanted to start by asking you to share why you thought this was a good idea. Why are we talking about it?
Right. Mahalo for that, and Kalamai for this technology things. But one of the reasons that I wanted to have this discussion, and honestly, we don't have enough discussions about our health overall, right? Just generally, we don't feel comfortable talking about those aspects of our health that may seem, very personal or maybe isolated to just you. And then you add on top of that your sexual health, right? And we definitely don't talk about that enough, right? And aren't able to really help ourselves navigate those,
Sorry.
Those conversations, right? We and even those of us who are more freer than others in the way that we discuss different issues, even we have things that was like, oh, I don't know if I should say this in this crowd of people or this group or this friend or so, because that might be too much, and so we kind of suffer in silence when it comes to discussions of our sexuality. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, let's just do it.
Let's do it.
Okay. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Me and you. Yeah. Let's talk about it. Let's allow and create the platform and the forum for others to talk about it. Yeah.
Mahalo. And, and I think we picked specifically Wahine sexuality because this is ʻAha Wahine, and so it's a place of gathering. We're not necessarily talking about, assigned at birth. We're talking about Wahine-ness. And so in that, I guess I just wanted to sort of say kind of how we stumbled on, hey, let's have this conversation, was a recent ʻAha Wahine presentation as part of the there was a larger ʻAha this summer, where we were talking about stress, and I was talking about the importance of our practice of ho'oku'u release. And someone said, okay, give me some examples of physiological release. And I said, exercise, nice deep breathing, going to the bathroom, you're letting a good release go. And then of course, orgasm. And in that, and connecting it to, it is one of our natural biological functions, but it's really vital to our health and well-being. That kind of launched us into, okay, we're going to have these normalizing conversations and we're going to talk about it. Now, if we are talking about Wahine Hawaii, if we're talking about indigenous Wahine, if we're talking about women of this day and age in the modern world, we can have a whole other seminar about how the stress and pressure that is upon us, that it's advanced placement to manage out there in the world in this way. So being extra good at knowing all of the ways that you manage stress, stay healthy and well, it becomes even more vital. And so one of the things that is really important here is to say sexuality is one part of your health overall. And if you've always thought of it as the part you squish, don't talk about, or just ignore because you don't have time and you're tired, then what you're doing is limiting one of the ways to stay well. And so I think that's why I wanted to sort of put that out there. And as a health person more generally, and someone who wishes all of they that are listening and joining us today to be well, I hope you can pull and know that we mean this to be for you. We are going to dance all over the place tonight because we are all boy hula. And so please go ahead and throw things into the chat. The wonderful ʻAha Wahine team is going to be monitoring the chat and throwing things to us when they pull things out that might weave in a good way here. So maybe we start with a fundamental starting point. So we're talking about Wahine across the lifespan. One of the things we know from sort of Western scientific research about sexuality is that in general, there's this understanding, and the data is a little old, but where kane tend to reach sort of sexual maturity or their peak around 18 to 20 years old. For Wahine, it's a little older. It's in their 30s, 30 to 35. And so one of the things we talk about is I actually suspect that that age is going to start getting younger as we get more comfortable with helping our kaikamahine to understand and embrace this sooner. But I think it's non-coincidental. When you think about what's happening to Wahine at that age, that is the time when that journey where you lilo I haumea, where you become an embodied haumea happens. It's where you come into your own, into your power in so many aspects of life. So if you think about this and you go, okay, by that time, you know the sound of your own voice and the power of it. You know what your tools are. You know if you're someone who gets energy from a small group or being alone versus being in a big crowd of people. You know a little bit more about how your heart works and how you partner in whatever ways you've tried that out by that age. You know who you are as a leader. You know in your professional self what you identify with that way. Maybe you know yourself as a parent or as someone who is a caregiver for other people in your family. So you are rising in your power in all of these ways. It makes perfect sense to me that you also rise in your power sexually. It makes perfect sense that all the mana is growing at the same time. And so that being an age when that tends to start happening, when you start feeling a little less dumb and a little bit more like you know yourself, it's really important that you don't leave the sexuality part of who you are out of that conversation. Thoughts there, boss?
Oh, I'm looking at some of the notes coming in.
I know.
Sorry, I always get. I love the chat features because they just allow us to have conversations, right? To have these like immediate conversations.
You know, what's so funny is I'm seeing there's people joining us from all over the Poipoi Honua. So some of you are really enjoying Wahine Sexuality late night. And some of you are enjoying it as a post-dinner conversation. And let me just say, this conversation is appropriate for the whole sunrise to sunset, all the way through the Omoe. So welcome. Yeah. What do you see in there?
No, and well, one of the things from what you were saying, right, that I wanted to leap off from is not only is this for Wahine and that we kind of come into our power in our 30s, right, at that age, like how you were saying. But we also have to recognize that the males in our lives sometimes are not on that same frequency, right? And knowing is half the battle, right? Like understanding that is half the battle. Trying to uplift them and bring them into, our, where we're at and stuff like that can be a really difficult thing. And that's where you get things like, what is it? Men are from Mars and women are from Venus.
Yes.
You get this split because there's just this misunderstanding that's kind of happening when we're not fully embracing where our partners are at, right, at any particular time. And a lot of the times, if we let ourselves take the lead from our partners in our life, right, if we allow that to happen, we get disconnected, right? We start to disconnect from our sexuality, right? We start to feel out of place, right? But once, I believe in, and it's been, just from what I've seen, right, that once we understand what's kind of going on with ourselves and the people around us, it's a lot easier for us to then navigate through that.
Sure.
And not bring ourselves down, not let our sexuality bring us down, and depress us, or, why am I feeling like this, but you're not feeling like this, right?
Right.
So I think what you said was key.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the consequences of this idea that it is this private thing, is that it isolates us from one another. And so because we don't talk about it in a regular dinner, although, as I said, we are fortunate to be in spaces and with people that, most things are laha, but when this is one of those topics where you're like, well, you know, it just needs to say private. What happens in the home stays in the home. We don't talk about it. What that does is it means you don't have anybody to bounce stuff off of. You don't have any idea that what you're going through is probably completely normal. And so what ends up happening is your ideas about partnering come from whoever you're partnered with, and whatever stuff they're bringing and whatever stuff you're bringing between the two of you, there's so much confusion, right? And so we end up in these weird ideas, like that your partner is responsible for your sexual enjoyment. Like that all by itself is a weird thing that happens, where when you look at, you know, like Wahine anatomy, that's actually not maybe the best way to be thinking about it. If you know that that's about you and your mana, and it's the magic you bring to the table, suddenly the conversation and intimacy is very different. I mean, there still is this idea of you give one another things and you enjoy the partnering, but can you imagine the difference of an experience of being partnered with, as you know, or, you know, even by yourself, where you come feeling like, I have this magic that I'm going to share with you. Come, check it out. It's bomb. That is a very different experience from, you know, it's in the dark. I'm sorry. You know, can you figure out how this works over here? You know, that's just a very different experience for both people, really, right? And there's so much space in between us, even as humans, even if you're the same gender, even if, you know what I mean, you come from the exact same world and you heard the same sex ed class as everybody else and nowhere else, there's still so much space between us, especially when we bring in guilt and shame.
Right.
Guilt and shame are so responsible for the secrecy, for the keeping on the under that prevents us from being able to kind of get feedback from other people about what might be going on here, how it all works together. And I think that's the piece that we also really kind of need to talk about is sex. If we think about sex in terms of the three piko, you guys, you know how we go like, okay, piko I, piko O, piko A. We remember piko A is our piko mai, right, of our three piko. And if we think about that, should we do a picture? I have a picture.
I think, yeah. And I think you should go back, because I know some people on here don't know about that. Don't know about the three people. They're perfect. Oh. Okay.
So this is a image from that Kekuni Blaisdell sort of promoted out there as part of Kumu Honua, Mauli Ola, and Auli'i Haini Hirahara was one of the folks that kind of brought this. And then I kind of put my Aukahi psychology and sex spin on it. So here we are. So across many cultures of the world, many First Peoples, there's an awareness that there are certain sort of centers or key points on your body. In a Hawaii sense, we call these our piko. Now, most people are familiar with using the word piko for the piko O, the one right in the middle that's shaped like an O for most people if you're an ini. That's your belly button. And that is the piko that connects you to the present. Why? Because that's the one that connects you to your makua. Literally, that is the how you were initially fed in the womb, right? So that piko is about the present tense. Now, when I talk about that piko, for me, we talk about what are the actions or energies of piko O. That's where you're connecting, teaching, sharing. That's the busy, that's the doing. Most of the time when we talk about how the world and life are stressing us out, it's usually piko O stuff that's causing a problem, right? We're having social relationship drama like that. Okay, piko I is actually where we begin. Piko I is that soft spot at the top of babies' heads before your bones close together. That is the piko at the top of your po'o. That is the one that connects us to our kupuna, to our elders. And it is about that's where our knowledge comes from, our wisdom. And so when we think about our genealogy, when we think about our cultural practices, all of that knowledge, wisdom, you know, when we lean into our mele, that's up here at piko I. And then piko A, say it with me. You'll never forget again the name of the piko. Piko A, that's our piko mai. That's our genitals. And that connects us to our future in a very concrete way. It is what we create and our creativity very literally is about if you produce children, right? So that's one way that you can remember what that one does. It's also where we create and innovate an imagination way. So when we're talking about sexuality, everybody's eyes go to the piko A because it's festive and usually implicated. But really, Sexuality is about all three people lining it up. And when all three people are lined up, so what's this one up here? This is knowledge, this is wisdom. Anybody ever have a fabulous romantic interlude because the exact right song was playing at the exact right time? Mele, hold our wisdom. That's Piko E, getting involved, right? That's about what we know. It's also because we know that we're fabulous, right? It's what we brought already, our wisdom, our history. I bring a wonderful genealogy that gave me many gifts, and I'm thrilled for them to join me in this moment, right? Then Piko O. What's Piko O again? Connecting, teaching, sharing, getting it done, right? This is kind of the drive. That's a word that comes up in a connection, right? So if we're talking about intimacy, and we mean partnering kind of intimacy, not just party of one, although connecting with yourself can be part of Piko O too. That's not the number two Piko that gets pulled in when we're talking about sexuality. And then of course, bringing in our great friend Piko A, mahalo. Yes. So yeah, this is just one, vowels can change on the names of them, but the Piko Ma'i, the creating, innovating, imagining. This is the festive. This is how we are playful. This is why mele ma'i are hilarious, not somber or some other negative word. When we can connect to our Piko A energy, we are innovative, we're playful, we're joyful. And in many ways, I talk about the importance of thinking of this energy, especially for people who have experienced any kind of sexual violence in the past, or they've had a real negative relationship with their body, where there's just lots of guilt and shame, or they don't feel like they're hot stuff, or something more, where maybe their ma'i was implicated in part of how they were harmed, either assaulted or any kind of harm, right? Somebody tells you that it's dirty when you got your first ma'i, for example, your you got it, and then somebody told you it was dirty and you have to get clean. All of those messages can create distance between you and this part of who you are. And so part of coming back to yourself and embracing the mana that you inherently have sexually is to engage the other parts of what Piko A is about, is that creativity and that innovation and that imagination. Those pieces, that fantasy, that part can heal really some of the stuff that the history, the negative history, the violence of it, or the harm or the hurt of it took away. It can help you reconnect without it necessarily just being about genitals. And I think that's the really important thing about us as Hawaii, is all of these things. I'm like, yes, the Piko is at your genitals, but it's not just about the structures. It's not really physiology. I mean, it is. But you know how in our mele, we bounce back and forth between the literal and the figurative. That's all Piko A stuff, right? It's literally this, but what it takes you to is this, right? What kind of mist is it? Did it come from down or up? You never know. And depending on which way you're facing, doesn't matter anyway. So we're gonna bounce back and forth, and that's gonna be part of our enjoyment. So you can kind of see that when we see ourselves in this one way of looking at balance and health from a Hawaiian perspective, that all of them can be implicated in sexual experience, but they're also made stronger when you're healthy sexually. I'm going to stop sharing and see what we think. Thoughts?
It's so brilliant. Mahalo. And for those of you guys who are out there, how much, or who of you, this is the first time you've ever heard about those three Piko, right? Put in the chat if this was something new for you. That you haven't heard before. And what I like about what Aukahi has said, right? It's a framework for understanding our own bodies, because we are so subject to kind of the manipulation of society around us, marketing, clever marketing, right? All kinds of marketing going on that shape our view of ourselves, right? And once we realize that there's internal mechanisms that are familiar to us, right? We were familiar with these, the manava and the Pikos and those kinds of things, but never put together because of maybe how our families discuss sex,
Or
right?
didn't.
How is, or didn't, right? Or the lack thereof, that conversation. We're not able to put that together with what's going on in our bodies, right? The feelings that we're having, right? Those, whether it's butterflies or, as Aukahi's, favorite word, tingling.
Tingles. Yeah.
Tingles.
Electricity, whatever. Mm-hmm.
Right. When those things start to happen to us, and no matter, it can be whatever age, right? When those things start to happen, we don't have we've gone away from those very cultural understandings of our own bodies that allow us to have either these conversations or allow us to have these understandings of ourselves. And, the more we understand about ourselves, maybe we don't have to discuss so much of it, but there needs to be a reconnecting, right? And Aukahi, I was going to ask you, so, you brought it up already about mele, right?
Yes.
And the important role that mele has played and still continues to play today in connecting for us our perspectives, our even practices on sexuality, right? And how prevalent, they were. Another aspect that kind of highlights or showcases how much us as a people and our kupuna, oh, so beautiful, right? The words, the different words we have, right, for all kinds of things that are not only going on physically with our own bodies, but in our relationship with others and in describing our sexuality, right? What is one of your favorite mele?
Give me a genre, girl. They're all my favorite, right?
Right.
Yeah.
How about like old school Hawaiian?
Old
Hawaiian
school
music.
Hawaiian.
Or even chants. Or
Okay,
even chants. Or
say.
even like mele kaiko.
Yeah. Among the mele ma'i, because that's immediately where I go. I want to say my first mele ma'i I learned was Punana Kamanu, so it's very hard for me to pick any other as my favorite. But I think He Ma'i no Iolani, for some reason, just floats the boat, just works for me. And maybe it's all the dress up in the Iolani Palace. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. That's not it. It's this thing right here. You remember this motion?
Yeah.
That's my favorite. Anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And then if we move forward to the era of kind of kika and composers that couldn't see but spent a lot of time feeling things with their hands and then writing songs about it, if you know what I'm saying. There were many, right? I mean, there's the Hapahaole language ones, Kiss Me Love. That's the one I was thinking of because I was picturing that and that is like very straightforward, like coming in your eyeball. Everybody knows we're talking about wooing somebody. But then the sort of sneakier ones tend to be more my favorite, where it's like, wait, we're here already? Right. Oh, you know what I mean? Oh, I didn't, anyway. And I love that we can talk about sex at a variety of ages. So, right, when we talk about Ke Aloha, we're talking about old love. We're talking about familiar, Wanohava Kupa is another one where we're like, I know you. This is not new, fresh. I just found out what flavor cologne you have today, right? This is, we've done the moves and you still float my boat, right? And then there's like all the wooing and the beginnings, the ma'anei mai ois, you know what I mean? That, stuff. And I don't know. What's your fave? You tell me.
No, and actually, I love what you just said, because in Hawaiian thought and the way that we process Hawaiian thought, right, through mele, right, when we put it out there, we do have those different genres, right? We have the mele ma'i that celebrates the procreativeness and even the responsibility of taking care of, right? The mele ma'i that were written for the chiefs were for them to be bountiful, right, and abundant, right? Yeah. And speaking about their actual genitals, right? And it was And it was done at the time of, birth or shortly thereafter, so you're thinking like, wow, you're thinking, adults thinking about children that way. But it was like, no, because in these children, right, lies the next generation, right, lay the next generation and the generation after that, right? So we've kind of demonized, right, so much so the importance, right, the important messages of the mele ma'i, and then all the way to of course, the ones that we are in love, but I love those the frisky ones, right, the ones that have there's no rules, there's no binding together of things.
Any song talking about a peacock, we're talking. I mean, come on, just any song that has one of them loud birds in there with the feathers. Right. That's where we are. In case you were wondering what songs, all the songs, but that's right. Just, and especially if you can picture Auntie Flo coming on by, licking her fingers, there we are, right? Right.
Naughty stuff is. Of course, and Aukahi is referring to the legendary Auntie Flo Koanui, who just recently passed last year, but her renditions, and every song turned into a mele ma'i.
Every song is a mele ma'i when she was around.
And that reminds me, one of our good friends, Dr. Noelania Rista, did a whole series of the 365 days of Aloha that she did online. And a lot of it was showcasing different mele every single day, so that we would be able to see as a people, right? And people who wanted to know more about us could see from all those mele that she pulled. And every day, for a year, right, she pulled mele that have to do with aloha. So we could see the wide variety, right? We could see the daytime, the morning time, the afternoon time, the awinala time, and the Aukahi time, and then the Aomoi time, right? All those time periods of when from pure friskiness to love, to the act of procreating to save the nation. Right. And all of those had, alignment into who the Kanaka are. I think one thing that has harmed our communities and has harmed our families and has harmed our women is this kind of practice that we have in our families today that didn't exist before, right? The practice of, yes, internalizing it and making the females in the family deal with their own things, right, by themselves, and even separate from the other women in their families, right? So traditionally, we had spaces like the halepe'a, right, that allowed our women a time where they were free from the men in their life, right, and from the outside kuleana, and could really just focus on themselves, right, from head to toe, focus on themselves. It was, some people call it an act of seclusion or exclusion, and I was like, no, it was an act of like, please free me from all these other responsibilities, because what's most important at this time is that my body gets to go through its cycling along with my other sisters and my mother and my grandmother and my daughters, and we can have this space to be able to have these conversations. That's
a perfect explanation of what that alternative perspective did to our understanding of our sexuality, of our ma'i specifically, like that part, but that piko, but also just ourselves. So if someone goes, oh, the Wahine go in there when they're right, oh, okay, then that must mean because that's dirty, that means they're hidden away, they're secluded because their stuff is dirty and don't go in the lo'i, and you know what I mean? They got to be hidden away. That whole perspective is one that layered on us and messes with our understanding of why women gather, in the same way that those same pressures and those same views changed our idea of our sexuality, right? In mele, we have 100 ways to talk about sex. We allude to sex, and lots of people think every song is about sex. Well, it is. And the funny part is that not because sex is the point. Sometimes sex is the way to explain how you feel about something else. Because it's not mysterious, it's a sensation we all know, right? The oohs and the ahs and the oh and the huh, it's all part of sensations and experiences that are lived by humans. If you're trying to explain how much you love your land, you love that mountain, it was so beautiful, it was so cold, it was so hot, those are sensations that can help people connect to it. So explaining using sexual metaphor gave us wisdom and perspective. That's opposite than to say every song has kauna and it lands in sex. I mean, yes,
Right.
but like not because we had to wait till we got to the fourth layer to talk about sex, but because
Right.
it's one of our most fundamental ways of experiencing ourselves and each other, right?
Right.
That's a big deal, you know.
Right.
And then anyway, and for me, like the idea that we have this power, this capacity, and it's a shared experience among us, is something that connects us all as very human. And so when we took that away and said, no, you whisper about that with your two friends in the locker room, and you take care of your products and you handle your business and don't come near me, you know, with all that, you know, keep it to yourself. And I heard you all get synced up cyclically and that scares the universe and whatever, all of that, all it does is put distance between us and connecting again, right? And in the world we have today, distance is our enemy, right? Making like my experience and we're so different in how we see everything. You know what I mean? That's the opposite of what we're talking about here. And unfortunately, the biggest expense is for our own health because we become distant from ourselves. If you don't know how you are in a sexual space, in who you are, in what you like, in how you feel, in what floats your boat, to so to speak, if you don't know those things, and if going there is layered in ʻaha, shame, and guilt, you're missing so much of the connection to who you are. And your mana, you know, you can't line up all the picos. You can't, you know, multiples is a normal thing when it's all lined up, right? That's the very concrete example. But right, the idea of orgasm is a singular event you get once every third moon when the wind blows right is like, okay, guys, we need to know our bodies differently, right? And there's a lot of research that says women that can achieve orgasm on their own have much more success, are much more likely to also then engage and experience that with partner, right? That's partners, whatever. That idea means we have to know ourselves, and it extends out to the other kinds of relationships we have. So intimacy sexually is one way, but it really, again, is a metaphor for how we connect with other people. The more you know this, the more you can channel this power, the more you can dig deep and know what of you want to show up with, the much better experience you're going to have of connecting to anybody else you want to out there. And that's very Hawaii of us to understand. You know what I mean? And to hide from that and be like, oh, but keep it under your mu'umu'u is like, okay, but that's missing part of what makes us well. Right. Yeah. Get some blush in the cheeks, you know? I'm just kidding.
I'm afraid that this might be, you know how people remember you for the way that, you know, you made them feel. I'm scared that what I'm going to say next is probably all that anybody's going to ever remember.
Someone's going to say at your eulogy, and do you remember that one time? I'm ready. I'm so ready. I don't know what this is, but I'm excited. Hit it.
Wahine, touch yourselves. Get to know yourself. Get to know what it is that you like, what you don't like, what is comfortable for you, what is not, what it is that you'd like to try, what it is that you don't want to try. Like, do not be afraid, right? You don't need permission from me, by the way, right? You didn't need that from me. But for those of you guys who just need a little bit of us, this is us sitting in the halepe'a right now.
This is what dinner with us is like, by the way.
By the way, right. But yes, please don't be afraid of not knowing. And this is bouncing off of what Aukahi was already saying about that, about knowledge of self, right? And being being able to be present and bring your whole self forward, right? Don't be ashamed or unafraid, right? Touch yourselves, feel yourselves, feel what it's like. I think some of you guys will surprise the hell out of yourselves, know, when it happens. But it's not, and you're not dirty, you're not bad, you're not evil, you're not lacking, of anything. And it's not, and it doesn't mean anything about your partner.
Nope.
Yeah. What you do with your body in understanding it and gaining an understanding is not a shot on your partner, right? It doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong, because they're going through the same things you're going through. It's about you being able to be, like how Aukahi said, kind of come forward, present, and being able to experience. Once you experience things yourself and you know yourself a little bit better, when you are, with a partner, it elevates from there.
Right. It's like, welcome. Let me show you some things. Let's have a blast. Let's do this. Let's create. Right. And then it's just, how do we play now? Instead of there's this goal we're trying to reach, because there's a right and a wrong, because there's a success and there's a pass-fail grade on this situation, all of that kind of goes away when you know who you are, when you know yourself in all the ways you need to. And, usually if you accidentally stumble on some freezing up, some guilt or shame, some negative talk, suddenly you're like the meanest person in your head, or you go like, or let's say you just haven't revved the engine in many a decade because you're like, look, that's just not where I am in my life right now. Like I'd rather, take a nap, or, I got laundry to fold. If that's not a part of where you are right now, just knowing, of course, it's your choice to bring that part out of yourself. Of course, it's okay to turn the volume down, rev it up, know what your normal is. We go through ebbs and flows in life, right? With all the changes that we experience as we go through all of the arc that it is to be Wahine. And then add that to the arc of whatever's happening with you and your loved ones, that sometimes there's times when this is just not the headspace you're in. When it hasn't been for a while and you notice, remember, it's a part of your health to check in on. Check in. Am I good? It's okay if I don't feel like I'm not into it today or whatever, but it is something to check on yourself about, because did you put it away because you think you're done with life? That's a question to ask yourself if you've just tucked that guy away, or if you said, you know what, I have my kuleana right now, or I have the kulana makuahine on me right now. Like that's what I walk around with, and because that's my kulana, hot to trot how I got to be a makuahine, not so much. It's okay, but you want to kind of know and figure out where that energy is going to show up in your life, because it doesn't always have to show up in exactly the same way, right? It can show up as a little zip, a little buzz you get over here, and maybe it takes you 3-4 days to flirt with yourself enough to be interested. That's great. That's fine. It's just about knowing that you remember you're still in there.
What's so funny is some people just jumped in as we got to that part of the conversation.
Yes. So they missed the whole cultural and the picos and the mana and haumea. They just heard, touch yourself, get her done, don't be a tired mommy. Cool. All right. That's all helpful messages, I think.
Right. It's like weha. Yes. And you guys didn't even have to pay cover for this
I'm
one.
just saying.
Aukahi, there's a question in the chat that comes from, a makuahine that, and I think you probably have a great answer for this too, and I'd like to add to it, but about what happens when your piko'a, she put it in the terms of fails you, right? Like where you have a miscarriage, right? And having that experience and then trying to come back from that experience.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And not sure, because the fear is, what if it happens again, right? It's such a devastating experience that it's hard. But, you talked about a little bit of this earlier about how the Piko ʻā is not only that procreation point, but it's also a space where other energies can come in and you can feel that kind of fulfillment, right? Is when you start to create other things in your life. Yeah. But yeah, do you have any mana'o to share? Any ike to share?
I have layered mana'o about that experience, honestly. And I think specifically that idea of your body goes through so much in loss. That kind of loss specifically feels like it's very Piko ʻā. But when you think about what it means to you and how it connects you to your genealogy and what you believe about what happens after, which brings in a fourth Piko, we don't need to go there today. There's an AP class by much better people at explaining it that can explain the one down lower. Anyway, that's one about transition, end of life-y kind of transition. But right, so there's so much that comes into play in that moment of loss that, of course, you go, my relationship to my body is not awesome right now. I'm kind of mad at my kino, or maybe I'm mad at spiritually. I'm mad at whoever decided, or whatever happened, right? I mean, you have all these feelings. There's this whole circle of stuff that you feel when loss happens. And so in the healing from it, in the finding your way back to your kino, to understand it, to love it, there is physical healing that has to happen. That takes longer than everybody thinks, right? That you have to allow your body to be renourished again because it geared up for this very important vital function, Wahine, and then it has to deal with the transition of not needing to finish that function, with needing to let go, right? So there is an absolute ho'oku'u that has to happen, and that is a really we might do it biologically or physically, but we don't necessarily do it emotionally or mentally. And so that needing to ho'oku'u, to release, to let it go, is a really, really important part of healing. Because once you can really let it go in all the ways, physiologically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all the ways, behaviorally, then we have to begin again to build pilina with our own body, with our ma'i. We need to like her again. We need to take her out for a trip and get her some cute underwear, whatever we have to do to reconnect and build that love again and build that enjoyment again of ourselves and that creativity. Have you ever noticed that lots of people write poetry when they experience loss? Lots of people do things in tribute. All of that is that creative Piko ʻā energy coming to support you at that moment. And so you lean into that Piko now, but if that Piko is acting up and you're not having it right now, you're just not on speaking terms. Speaking of the Haumea Chronicles, if you're not on speaking terms with her right now, then maybe you lean into the other two Piko. Maybe you need to lean into your kupuna. Maybe you need to lean into your mo'okuauhau. Maybe you need to immerse yourself in the living Piko ʻā stuff, maybe. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Ka'u, please unmute and say that out loud for those that aren't reading the chat. Ke olu olu. You knew I was trying to dare you in the water. I knew I'd get there if I said herbs or something. What we got?
I knew I just had to say. No, I just feel like some of the work that we're doing with birthing, that for us culturally, ceremony and protocol are so important. And so if we have, certain hours, certain ways that we take care of the body or the babies or things, that this can help our moms help to process, give them something, tools to process through. The other thing that I think is so important is making sure you have a community of women around you that support you and that are solid and that are there for you, that we're often so busy doing all kinds of things. And, I love how you guys say that you get together and this is what you talk about. Like, it's super important for all of us to have that kind of bond and connection with other Wahine in our lives as we go through all of these types of things.
Absolutely. That's actually our homework for you, just to skip ahead a little bit in the script, because we're getting close to the end of our time. But we want you to have these conversations, have them. Your homework is to figure out a space where you can introduce this and go, I was on this webinar last night or this past week, and they were talking about this and this and this. And even if you just have a great giggle or you tell a couple of spicy stories, do it. Start talking about it. Because the whole range of what we are can be connected to sexuality in some way without it necessarily having to be like, oh, I'm sex obsessed, or oh, I'm, yeah, and no, I just mean it's part of who we are. And if it's part of the fabric of these conversations, we make it more normal, then maybe we would have people less in abusive relationships. How do you think people get in relationships where they think they're supposed to get slammed against the wall by somebody, or that their partner is supposed to punch them in the face and then be real nice and say they're sorry? How do you get in that loop? You get in that loop because you don't know that that's not okay, and that, you know, you never heard enough Beyonce. Like, another one will come right on by if you found a mean one by mistake, right? Or someone who's got their own trauma and their own demons. And so they're busy not loving themselves. They cannot be with you in a loving and gentle way. So if what we want is healthy, vibrant lahui, we cannot then in the dark leave parts of who we are in the dark and expect that it's going to grow healthily there, right? That's how human trafficking happens. Right. We don't know what to think. And then somebody says specific nice words, and we don't know that we can just tell our mom, our cousin, our sister, our friend about what this person said that really floated our boat, and we're not sure, but it feels like my whole life's in the balance. We don't talk, so then we don't know, and we can't protect one another. So having the conversations, even if it's just because like a delightful little 12-year-old walks on by and hears you and your friends chatting and makes it okay. Or you and your friends are chatting and they learn that menopause is not terrifying, right? Or they learn, right? All those things that we don't hand each other. We got to have these conversations, y'all. Okay.
I love the idea of conversations, but how else do we raise our daughters differently?
Mehana?
Yeah, you know, we gotta start having those conversations rather openly, and it's difficult. You know, it's difficult because the society around us wants to, and we too, we want to protect our daughters, right? So what to say about sex has always been a problem, right? It's like we want to give out enough information that helps them, you know, be able to be the most successful in their life, but not give them, you know, all of the information that makes it sound so good, right? Like that they go out and they run out and start engaging in sexual activity without being emotionally kind of aware of who they are, right? So I would, because of all of that, and that might not have made sense, but
I was feeling
like for me, it would be to talk about strengthen the woman inside of our daughters, right? Strengthen their ability to have a confidence that's shaped by them, by your family, not by, you know, the kids around them, not by, you know, what they see. And I've seen families do this rather successfully, right? Where their kids question the kind of crap that the world tries to place on them as how they're supposed to look, how they're supposed to behave, and so forth. And they really kind of assume a path that's their self-awareness is built earlier than normal. And that's super important. I always, you know, for me, the answer always is hula, right? I think if we just had more hula people on planet Earth, we would be just so amazing. And because there's an opportunity in hula to teach all these frameworks of well-being, right? And body knowledge of body and awareness and how you're carrying yourself and how you're moving and so forth, and connect all those dots, right? It's one of the places in 2022 that we can still talk about through the mele, talk about those things that were healthy for our kupuna that makes sense for us to bring into 2022, right? And talk about sexuality, understanding about body and self and well-being, emotional, spiritual, physical, is something that's so evident in our mele and amongst our kupuna that hula provides the perfect platform for us to do it. Now we just need kumu hula to actually do it, right? To actually utilize that tool, that amazing tool that they have, to be able to showcase this. And if we start doing that with our children, our girls from a young age, right? Through the mele, through empowering their bodies, through strengthening their bodies, minds, and spirits in that sense, I think we'll be on a really good path.
Yeah. You know, I love that idea, right? That, I mean, because when you think about what are the lessons of hula, right? And I always say this, if you don't have a cultural practice, it doesn't even have to be a Hawaiian one, although ours are fabulous and festive and rich. Cultural practice teaches you so many things. Most of what it teaches you is implicit, layered with explicit. So to learn about how your posture is carried to dance hula is to learn that your body is powerful and you're in control of it, right? You learn that the energy that you hold inside here goes all the way out to your fingertips. And then from there, to borrow from my Kumu, all the way out to the horizon, right? That we have energy, we have power. And when you know that you have power, you know that you can delight a whole room of people with just one glance over there to the that way. It is very hard to then take that person and squish them down into something and let them be small and let them be harmed. Let the world take advantage, right? Because they know their power. So I love that idea. I think if I would add, I think it has a lot to do with the way that we treat and talk about Waiwaka Lehua, how we talk about their first menses for those, you know, especially. I think that way it's handled, how it's talked about, gives them so many messages about what we think about sexuality and health and their bodies going forward, that we don't even have to do all the rest. If that goes well, they'll figure out how to ask the question. And then as a boy mom, I want to say that's as a boy mom, I want to say that's the other part of how we make sure that health is there, is that these aren't things that I only whisper to the girls. I mean, yes, there are spaces when we want to organize our energy by similar, yeah, the conversations, we want to do that. But that part of consensual participation about I feel good in me and you feel good in you. You know, I use phrases like, if you can't say it, you better not do it, right? If you can't articulate out loud what it is that you'd like to do with a person, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, because that means it's too embarrassing. Okay, then maybe you're not the right kind of pili for this, right? Is it wrong? Is it shame? Are you dirty? No, it's, are you ready? Is this what you actually want? And do they want the same as you? That's a negotiation that takes a fair amount of maturity. I don't know if you know this, but young people can't communicate as well as the bigger ones, you know, and then some bigger ones communicate like they're 12. So we have to like work on that part. If what we want is a lahui where we want to end cultural and historical trauma, yes, we need to speak our olelo. We need to engage in our cultural practices. We have a lot of stuff we got to do. And this is one space where we can reclaim our ea individually. And then as ohana, we can help us take this back. Take it back and bring it to us and empower us. That's my, I don't know. Boy, we ended big. I thought we were going to talk about zippy orgasms and move on, but yeah.
Oh my gosh, this hour has gone way too fast. I love that you guys brought in Auntie Flo and talked about from friskiness to making the lahui survive and giving us a framework with which to understand ourselves. I think that's so important. And Mehana, you are going to go down as the one who said, yes, please go out and touch yourself.
I'd wear that shirt all day.
But I can see from the chat that people would definitely like to have another session on this. And so, you know, for those of you that are saying, you know, let's do a hanaho, please make sure you fill out the survey and put that you'd like to learn more, or, you know, what kind of questions do you have? Also, if there's other topics that you would like to see, please put it down. I'm gonna give Aukahi and Mehana, if you folks just have a few closing sentences. I'm always scared with Aukahi and Mehana to say just a few closing sentences because I don't know that they could do that. But we are at 8 o'clock, but I want to give you time to close out and to give any final thoughts.
I'll go first, and I'll shock you, right? Mahalo to ʻAha Wahine. This is a perfect space for us to, have a mahalo for you guys and your hard work in curating these conversations over the past 2 years and on into the future. Also mahalo all of you women who are out there. I'm reading your comments as you go by, and ku'u, thank you, ku'u kana hele in there put that, my daughter, I tell her, you don't only have to talk to me. You can go talk to your other aunties. And all the other aunties' kids know that they can come and talk to me. So there's a couple of things you're going to hear from me. Go out and touch yourself, right? Or go in and touch yourself. I don't know, wherever you got to touch yourself.
Outdoors is lovely. Yeah. So's indoors, sure.
And then, right. And then the second thing is be that auntie. Be that auntie, that nurturing figure in your community that not only the kids, right, but the adults, your peers, even some of the women who are older than you, that person that they can have a conversation that is not judgmental, that is helpful for their well-being, right, and that is full of aloha. Yeah, if you remember those two things from me, you can go repeat it at my eulogy. I'll be I'll be all good with that.
Or your Lifetime Achievement Award. Maybe that ceremony. How about that?
Your OO award.
My OO award.
Yeah, that's how I'll say it. I am also so grateful to be part of this conversation. We imagine that from this, we would go into like sort of breakout sessions and go get it. You know what I mean? We talk about things. So if that's something that you want to do, start one for you, and then ʻAha Wahine will do it too. That the energy of this is definitely from love and joy. And so I would say the take home for me is go have the conversation and don't limit your mana. Go make sure this part of who you are shows up too, and you'll be well for that. But yeah, it's just been so much fun to be here. Even the energy of the chat, it's flying. This was not a Marvin Gaye type of episode. This was a hit it. This was go. There was not a lot of lead in. No, I'm just kidding. The chat is flying. We are so happy to be here. So thank you so much.
Okay, mahalo Aukahi, mahalo Mehana, mahalo to everybody out in Facebook and wherever you're watching us from. We would like to thank our sponsors again, Hawaii People's Fund, Papa Ola Lokahi, o EVTV, Maili Kukahi, Roots Program of KKV, University of Hawaii, and E Kolumea Nui. Please visit us at, we have both an Instagram and we have a Facebook page. It will contain all of the past episodes that we've done, including this one, and we'll talk about future episodes as they are coming up. We enjoyed our evening together. The time went by too fast, and we have to say goodnight. Mahalo and a hui ho.